Reminder of how this goes. We are gonna do training all week this week from 1:30 till 5 o'clock. And then after that, we are gonna do a week break. And then when we come back from our winter break, we are gonna do training again from January 2nd all the way till the 5th. We will have guest trainers here and there. The most important training, and I'm gonna really emphasize this, that I would like people to be present on, is a training this Wednesday by Dr. Nolan Cabrera, and that will be about systems of inequity, that we are gonna kind of start on a little bit today. And then the Friday training, which is about vicarious trauma. There's a little bit of the ACEs childhood trauma in there, but based on what the trainer and I have discussed, we are all pretty much already in the same line when it comes to trauma. So what she actually wants to help us do is how do we deal with the trauma that we experience working with a bunch of kids that have trauma. And how do we deal with it when the trauma for us is every day, every time we see the kids, and whereas the kids have us to turn to for the trauma, who do we turn to and what do we do and how do we cope with it and how do we not suffer burnout. So definitely the Wednesday and Friday training are something that we've actually opened it to the community because we believe those trainings are the most important. Not to say that the other trainings are not important. A lot of the other trainings will build on each other. For those of you that have been with me for a while, you all know how this kind of works. So that will be our main focus. To give a heads up with everybody too, I like physical activities as icebreakers. So if you made the mistake of being too dressy today, which I don't see anybody doing that is awesome. But I will give you the heads up now. Don't be too dressy for any of these trainings, because we might end up playing dodgeball, we might end up playing basketball, and they will all kind of, look at that, and they will all kind of connect to our training. Are you being escorted in? So just a heads up, during the training days, make sure at the very least you bring sneakers and something you will be comfortable to walk around and run around in, because I'm notorious for doing that. Alright, so we good with that? We kind of got all the niceties out of the way. Finally, you all know where the bathrooms is at, so if you need the restroom, go use it. And then if you, please go around, so that way the camera doesn't capture you. Alright, so go around if you're going to use the restroom. And then secondly, if you have questions, and it's not the question answer time yet, I'm pretty open. You can just kind of raise your hand, blurt out your questions. If you have comments, raise your hand, blurt it out. Or if you don't feel comfortable voicing it out to the group, feel free to email me. My email is up right now, jansen@higherground.me. Feel free to email me there, email me your question, and I will answer it or try to answer it if I have the answer. That way, for those of you that don't like being put on the spotlight, we can do it that way. Pretty cool? Two things good? Alright, I will read your question out loud though. I will not say who it's from, that way the camera captures it. That's pretty much it. Alright, so like I said, the first part of this training we're going to skim through, because I think everybody already knows our mission, vision, and our purpose and all of that. But it's always good to start off the training remembering why we're here, why we do what we do, especially since we are on our 10th year, and organizations, we all have kind of this growth trajectory, okay? So, you think you're doing really good, but you're not, you're actually about to fail, and then you reach rock bottom, and then you go up. That's how most businesses and nonprofits are. And usually this point is 9 to 10 years. So we made it. So now we're on our way up. And what that means is some systems will change. There will be instances where we will become a little bit more bureaucratic. If you haven't worked for any other organization before, you may be really blinded by the idea that this is how easy it is to deal with things. But in most organizations that are big, paperwork and bureaucracy exist in about 10 times the level that we do. So it's important that we always understand our mission and vision before we transition to a new phase. As you all know, SVP has come. We're already doing a lot of strategic planning. We're already doing a lot of shuffling going on. That way we can manage our growth. So let's start with our mission. Before we start with saying what our mission is, what is a mission for? Who remembers what that is for? Why is it important for us to have a mission? What is a mission? It's direction. What else? What else is a mission? What is a mission for?
To keep us on purpose.
To keep us focused, right? So there's part of mission that keeps us focused. What else? Why do we have a mission? What is the difference between a mission and a goal, for example?
It lets others know the purpose of the organization.
So this is also to communicate, very good, why we exist. It's one thing to have goals within the organization that we all know. It's another thing for other people to know why we're doing what we're doing. What else? What is a mission for? So Rebecca said to keep us focused. What else? Why does this matter? Why do we drill our mission almost every training? What is a mission for?
We're all on the same page. We're all going the same direction. Going the same.
So there is this direction and unity. What else?
It's probably the reason that the organization exists.
It's the why of what we do. What else? How many of you served in the military or have military people in your family? Okay, what is the mission for? From that term and sense. What is the mission for? When they receive mission, what does that mean for them? This is what they set out to accomplish. Right? The mission is there so that everybody knows what we are here to accomplish, what this is specific. And this is something that has to be specific. Right? So when you're in the military, there's this big organization, and obviously you can simplify it as we got to win the war. But that's not the mission. Right? Every front, every platoon, every squad has a specific set of what to accomplish. And honestly, the mission doesn't actually necessarily explain the why. It really explains more of the what. You can have a mission without understanding why you are doing that. But it does matter because it needs to be communicated. I take the military a lot for this example because it's the easiest way to understand. Because if this whole side of the room were in the military, and this whole side of the room was also in the military, but this side of the room has a different mission than this, why is it important for you to know what their mission is if you were all in the same battlefront? So that you guys know what? End up shooting each other. That's a reality. Right? So if you know that there's a group of them going into the middle of the battle, and let's say you're artillery, you don't end up bombing them. So it's important that you can actually communicate what they're doing. You don't necessarily need to know why. They're in the middle of the battlefield, this small group. They're in the middle of the enemy territory. Why? We don't know. We just know they're there, and we know that what they're doing is they're going to destabilize XYZ. Cool, and we are going to wait until 1900 hours, then we can go in. Right? That's what a mission for. And finally, for the team, from an individual perspective, it keeps us focused. The number one reason why nonprofits fail after 5 to 10 years is what? Mission drift. You guys will hear this a lot. Whether that nonprofit is in education, behavioral health, health in general, churches, religious establishments, whatever it is you can think of, the number one reason why they fail is what we call mission drift. What is mission drifting? Straining. This is when people begin to operate from the idea of, that sounds like a great idea, let's do it. That's why sometimes ideas are actually counter to the improvement of the mission. There are a lot of great ideas in the world, but we can't do them here. You know, again, I go back to the military. Doesn't matter how great your idea is as a squad, if it doesn't push your mission forward, that's dangerous to your squad. You can end up dying. Of course, with our organization, there's not that dire, like, oh, we might die and people might die, right? But in a sense, we need to understand that when you mission drift, when you take your focus off of the mission, your organization begins to die, no matter how good that idea is, no matter how good it feels, right? The other thing that the mission does, especially in nonprofits often operate in this mindset. Do, you know, whatever the community needs. It's an altruistic concept, right? Or the other one is, this is another famous kind of like phrase or philosophy in nonprofits, which is basically serve everyone in any capacity. For those of you who've worked in nonprofits or churches enough, you've heard these two statements in many variations, right? How many of you have heard this or have somewhat of variation of that, right? Do whatever it takes. Do whatever it needs. This is actually really dangerous for nonprofits. That mindset is one of the most dangerous mindsets for an individual in a nonprofit. Who can tell me why? It's a very altruistic, non-selfish mindset. But why is that so dangerous? Huh? There's risks. What else?
You dive into areas you don't have the capacity to.
You dive into areas you have no idea what to do in. What else? Burnout. Resources. You run out of resources. What else?
Too vague.
Huh?
It's too vague.
Too vague. It is absolutely too vague. And the problem with this model is that the community will always have needs. And the problem with nonprofits is we often attract altruistic people. None of you are here because you want to be a billionaire. And if you are, I'm telling you right now, quit. If this is your pathway to either become a billionaire or a celebrity, quit. Alright? This is the do it. Right? Unless we're in the, you know, healthcare non-profit business, then maybe you can become a billionaire. Right? But most people who go to nonprofit, we go in here why? Why are you here? Because you want to do what? You want to serve? You want to do good? You want to make a difference? Come on, it's not corny. Trust me. Why are you here? Blurt out your reasons. Huh? To help people. Kids. Help the community. Make an impact. Right? That's the kind of people we attract. And so individually, honestly, we probably have this mindset. We want to do whatever it takes, and we want to serve in any capacity. Churches say this all the time. It drives me crazy. I grew up in a church background when it comes to nonprofit. Do whatever. You know, we change, we serve the community, and we be the answer for whatever the community needs. The problem with this is, one, it's too vague. Number two, it's burnout. Number three, you don't have unlimited resources. So even as an individual, it is important for you to understand the mission so that you don't run out of resources, you don't burn out, and you're not vague. Because the honest answer is, nobody in this room has the capacity to do everything for even one person. None of us have that capacity. You cannot be everything to one person. That's just one person. No organization in this town can answer all the problems of this community, even in a mile radius. Not one organization. Not one organization has the brain capacity, the actual resource capacity, and the actual people capacity to do it. Not one. So the mission actually helps you find a niche to serve in. That's what the mission does. It helps you find that niche. This is what we will do as to what and how we will do it. This is that niche. Anything outside of that, are we going to ignore it in a certain sense? Yes. Again, I go back to the military. If their mission is to destabilize a bunker, for example, so that the other group can go in, and let's say they find a firefight on their way to the bunker, do you honestly think they're going to stop what they're doing and go to that firefight and help that firefight? Or are they going to keep charging to the bunker, hoping that that troop can hold their own? I mean, in movies, yeah. Right? We love that kind of stuff in the movies. In real life, what happens? Everyone dies if they do that. So what do? They go to the bunker and ignore what's happening to a certain degree and keep charging on. Again, like I said, I like using the military because there's that sense of urgency. And I want us to understand that sense of urgency. It's the same thing here. When we find our niche, it is what we need to keep doing. And the other stuff, that's why we find partners. Because it's the partners that can do those. Even if it feels like we need to do it, we need to fight that urge. Hello. Questions so far? Does any of this does not make sense or something that you are terribly opposed to? No? Alright, good. So if this makes sense to everybody, so then now, it is therefore important that we know our mission. So what is our mission? Come on. Yay! We gotta reach, transform, elevate, right? Who are we reaching? Right. Who are we transforming? Families. Right. And who are we trying to elevate? This community. That's very important. Alright, how do we do it? That's right. Right? Through?
Love and building character.
Love and building character. Self-control was the old one, which is still kind of the same. Now, this statement has transformed over 10 years. It will probably go through another transformation, probably within the next 2-3 years. But the only thing that matters is the way it's worded. It changes the way it's worded. Everything else remains the same. Like for some people, they're still saying love and self-control because it used to be self-control instead of building character. For some people, they don't say the individuals, families, and community because it used to be just reach, transform, elevate. Right? For some people, but in the last 10 years, the essence of this mission has not changed. Alright? Now we just break it down into simplistic sense, right? We reach individuals. Why individuals? Why not youth? Have you guys ever asked that question? Why did we put individuals and not youth? We work with families, but families are there already.
Because they grow up and we're still helping them.
Because they grow up.
Going back to what you said earlier, are you going to change it because it's slightly vague? The average person would read that and not really know that could be a ballet company's mission.
Yeah. It is the reason why it is going to change a little bit. Because this does not do well on this part. It does well on everything else except this part. Everything else it does well with. Alright, so back to my question. Right, why did we say individuals? Right, one, what did you say? They grow up. But the most important part of this.
Because each person is an individual.
Because children, very good, youth are just simply people. I want us to get out of the savior mentality. We are not their savior. We will never be, and we should never be their savior. And a lot of times when people get into this work, our first mentality, whether we admit it or not, is to save people. And if you tell me that you haven't felt that way before, at least at one point in your work here, I'm going to tell you there's a problem. You haven't been invested enough. But if you have invested enough time, you want to. It's normal. It's human. But that's the problem. The moment you have a savior mentality, you now see yourself as above others. Who are you to save them? What do you have that's so special that can save someone? Seriously. We're all human beings struggling to figure this out. Any of you figured out what you want in life yet? And how to get there? Doesn't matter what age you're at. That is an eternal human struggle. And that's why we put individuals to avoid this idea that they're children and we're above them because we're adults. I want to tell you guys something. Observe how adults treat children. Observe it. And let me tell you, there's actual science behind this. There is 90% of adults that would treat children in behaviors that they would never treat adults. Some of you may be guilty of this. Watch how you talk to kids. I know I was guilty of it for a long time in my life. Watch how you talk to kids versus whether you would talk that same way to an adult. You won't. But you do it. Why? Because they're kids. They're below us. Are they? But again, that's part of the reason why philosophically we put individuals. Because we want our organization to have this understanding that kids are just human beings. They're individuals. They're not below us. There's nothing. I've said this before. The only difference between adults and kids is simple. Adults are just kids who have experience. That's it. That's the beauty of being an adult. I get to be a kid, but now I kind of know more things that I shouldn't do. I get to be less impulsive. But at the end of the day, I don't have it figured out. There are some things that you will be surprised that a little kid has it better figured out than you do. I can guarantee that. You talk to some of our kids, they have it better figured out than most of us in some areas of their life. That's why we just put it as individuals. We're here to reach individuals. Right? It's all the same. Why families? Why do families matter?
If we could get rid of them, our job would be easier.
This is being recorded. But having a candid conversation and honest conversation, I mean, those of you who have worked long enough in this work, one of the conclusions you get to is what? It's what? It's the parents' fault. But again, right, because we don't want to put a blame on a specific group of people, we want to help that transformation. And the simplest idea is this. A lot of our problems that we're dealing with in school, in the behavioral health world, and what we do here, if we can get parents to understand a different way of treating their children, it will change. That's why families are so important. Because essentially, too, here's the other part. People build families. Individuals build families for the most part. So whether we like it or not, the individuals we're reaching now, guess what they're going to have eventually? Families. And our hope is that we've broken that cycle. Or the reality is what? What's the reality? Let's be real. Their kids will end up here. That's why we'll never run out of a job, unfortunately. Every nonprofit's dream is what? If you're a good nonprofit, what is your dream? to work yourself out of the need. That is every nonprofit's dream. We all operate in this idea that if we do this good enough, eventually they won't need us. I wish. That is our utopia, that is the unicorn that we gotta capture. But the reality of it is, it's a llama. It's long-necked and spits at you. Well, that's an alpaca. There you go. Spits at you. Right? And they stink. Right? That's the reality. The problems in this community just don't go away, no matter how effective the nonprofit is. Because at the end of the day, it's the family unit that we really got to be able to invade in. And because families are affected by what? Families are affected by their community. We need to elevate that part too. Right? My personal dream for Higher Ground is that it gets big enough to the point that we're creating economy here. And we're hiring our kids. That'd be amazing. We kind of started doing that. But it's not quite there yet. But it'd be amazing to create an organization that creates economy. Because again, that's part of elevating the community. And regardless of how much education work we do, how much behavioral health work we do, the truth of it is, if nobody's building economy here, it won't work. Right? Now, what makes us good is also the very same reason, and you guys have heard me say this the last week, what makes us good is also the very same reason why we can't grow. What is that for? The one life at a time. If you were to ask the community, and we did this, alright, somebody who's helping us do our strategic plan did this. They asked the community members, what makes Higher Ground unique and effective? Because the community generally sees us as effective. You know what answer always pops up? There's 3 answers that always pop up. One of them is this. Can anybody take a guess since we're in that topic? What's one of them? That what? What do we do?
You know the answer.
Yeah, you can guess. You can cheat.
We go the extra mile for it.
We go the extra mile. That's like just different wording, but it's always they think out of the box. They do things nobody else would do. They do things other organizations aren't willing to do. Or they do things that nobody else will think of doing. They go the extra mile. And it goes back to that one life at a time. The problem with that is that's not sustainable. Can you imagine having to go there? Right now we're doing that for about 150 kids. Can you imagine having to go the extra mile for 400 kids? Doing what we do with specific families that we've done here, like doing home visits, going straight down to getting their grocery list together, going straight down to helping DCS with family placements. Can you imagine that, doing that for 400 kids instead of 150? Being there when their parents are fighting, being there when cousins are invading their house, visiting their schools, talking to their teachers, that's impossible. Now, imagine doing that to 10,000 kids. Yeah, we got this, sure. Right? It's not a sustainable model. Why then do we keep doing it? It goes back because that is our mission. That's why we've refused to grow. We've had offers to open other after-school programs over and over again for the last 5 years. Open another after-school program, open. And you know what our answer is? What our eternal answer has been? No. No. Why? Because again, we understand that the moment we do that, we are now mission drifting. Because we can't do one life at a time with more than the kids that we already have. Our hope is that with community schools model, we can kind of do it. That's the hope there. To a certain degree. But if you guys notice, even with our community schools, what are we doing? Are we serving the entire school? What are we doing? We are targeting a very specific group of kids. Why? So that we can never mission drift from the one life at a time. Why do we do DAPE? We could do something much bigger contract than just DAPE. Because again, with DAPE, the idea is, how many kids do you guys usually handle in one room? 8 to 15 kids. And how many staff members are in there? 3. Right? So again, one life at a time. This part matters so much in our mission. How are we going to grow with that? I don't care. Maybe we should never grow. I'm okay with that, as long as we're doing our mission. You know, again, I go back to the military. Specialized group in the military, are they big? No. They're usually, what, 12 in a squad? There's 12 of them. And they do what they do, and they do it best, and they don't grow. But they do what they do. I'm okay with that. When I'm asked why, because again, I go back to the mission. Because our mission is one life at a time. We've defined ourselves as that. This is important for you guys to understand too, because sometimes you get asked to do things that are beyond what your expectations are. One of the complaints about me as a leader, even in the leadership assessment, and I'm okay with that complaint for now, I'm learning how, is that the bar is set too high sometimes. The expectation is too high. And it's hard to follow in those footsteps. That was actually a complaint that the community even said. Like, well, when Jansen dies, we don't think anybody is going to take over that with that bar. I'm okay with that. I'm going to learn how to kind of make my expectations a little bit better. Not lower them, just make them better and more realistic, right? But again, it goes back to that, one life at a time. Now, the last part speaks to our how. Love and building character, right? We live in this fallacy, especially in the education system, that there's only 2 ways to do things. And the first way is freedom. Freedom and love. And that the second way is rules, right? Rules and character. That's how our education system thinks of the world. Right? Even when you watch movies about schools, it was funny. We were watching a movie, Santa Claus 2. Hate the movie. Alright?
You laughed the entire time.
Santa Claus 1 was awesome. Santa Claus 2 was way too predictable and stupid. Alright, but, sorry if you love it. Alright, it's stupid. Right? But, in that movie, you can kind of see, I love watching movies from a social perspective. You can kind of see the point of view. Here was this principal who, obvious, within the first scene, you're like, oh, he's going to fall in love with her. Cut the story and just go straight into that. We all know that's what's going to happen. Sure enough, that's what happened. But anyway, if you haven't seen the movie, sorry, spoilers. Right?
No.
It's all about rules and character. And her defense was simple. We run a very prestigious, what was it? Public school. And we have always taken pride in our high academic performance. And you see all the accolades. And her mindset was very zero tolerance. And you see it, at least for the first part of the movie. You see it when she meets this roller skater down the hallway. And she stares at him. And she tells this student, look into my eyes. I'm like, that's not creepy. Right? And the student is like, what do you see? And the student goes, it's black, dark, and cold. Right? And the principal's like, and that will be your future if you continue doing this. Turn back around. I'm like, wow. Right? But again, rules and character. And the assumption that you make in the movie is that because you have a hardline zero tolerance principle, right, academic results flourish. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is the movies like Freedom Riders. Right? Love the movie. Absolutely love the movie. But the idea in Freedom Riders is here's this naive, passionate teacher who doesn't set any boundaries necessarily. And again, I love the story, but when you read the real thing, it wasn't that simple. But in the movie, obviously, they romanticize it, and they make it as simple as, here she is, and she made them write stories, and that was it. Writing those stories and building that relationship with all the freedom and the love transformed all these kids overnight. Again, the real story wasn't that easy. She was what? Who said that?
The real story, she was like a mean lady apparently until
She wasn't that nice in real life. Right? Because again, our society lives in this fallacy that you can only either be full of freedom and love, and you let, and for kids to love you and for kids to listen to you, you gotta be all nice and rainbows and unicorns and lilies and, daisies and, fairy wings and fairy dust, right? Or you can only be hard-nosed, militaristic. You do what I say, it's mine or the highway, and everything is blah, 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 blah. That is a fallacy. That is a lie.
I love you as I spank you.
The reality of it is, kids operate best. Humans, for that matter, operate best. And again, for those, like I said, I'm not going to deny my, my background. My nonprofit lifetime was in church. Even churches fall through the same thing, traditionally. You got what we call in the church movement the hyper grace movement. Everything's okay. Live your life. And then you got the law. You're going to hell. Right? Again, and there's no middle. Right? But that is again a fallacy. Humans in general live best. At least this is what we believe in higher ground. We live best when we're able to do both. That's why we say through love. When children genuinely feel loved, and they genuinely know that you care, and they have a little bit of freedom to express their creativity, freedom to express to communicate what they feel without repercussions, the freedom to be themselves and to see themselves, but also at the same time, have the boundaries and the rules so that they can build character. And when you do that, you set kids up for success. That is what we believe in. That is our mission. This is part of the reason why we don't kick kids out, but also part of the reason why we don't just let kids run amok. And we have difficult conversations with them, where I have told the kid, you are spoiled, and you are ungrateful, and you need to learn how to be grateful. Or we've had conversations with kids where we tell them, you are being disrespectful. And guess what? That is okay. Be straight up with them. But again, you can't just do that. You have to understand that they also need your love and affection. And they need that amount of freedom to be themselves. But that at the end of the day, being yourself isn't just enough. That you need to constantly build a better version of you. That's the character part. Constantly build on that. And the thing about this is the reason why this is so important that we understand is because this entire mission hinges on each one of us. This entire mission hinges on each one of us. From the person driving our kids, to the person reading our kids, to the person running programs, to the person working one-on-one with them, to the person doing the testing. It hinges literally on all of us being able to balance love and building character. Because the reality of it is, there is no curriculum or program or system that humans can follow to constantly build love and character at the same time. It is only built by relationships. In fact, there is literally several studies out I've discovered, right? By connecting with so many scientists. There's so many studies that have literally made the correlation between the deliverer and the curriculum they're delivering. And you know what is the conclusion in all those studies? That the curriculum only matters when the person delivering it is able to build relationships. That's the conclusion of almost every study. That regardless of how effective a curriculum is, when the person delivering it doesn't have that, it will fail. It will not have the same amount of results. So in other words, curriculum by itself is actually useless. Curriculum is only good to give to a person who already understands love and building character. When you give it to that person, his or her job gets easier and gets more effective. But you give that curriculum to just anybody, it won't work. So this is why understanding our mission is so important, because individually, we all need to be bought into this. And if we're not, we're working with the wrong nonprofit. We're working with the wrong mission. So we have to buy into this, because again, our entire organization hinges on each individual's approach. Question about this? No question whatsoever? You good? Alright, so we are going to now shift from this to what we call our social philosophy. And most of you haven't probably actually heard this part of it. This is going to become important. Our social philosophy is going to become important because as Higher Ground grows, it now becomes important that we all have the same point of view on our society to a certain degree. And why does that matter? Why does it matter that as we grow, not only do we have the same mission, but we now have the same way of viewing our society? Why does that matter? Why does our view of our society matters? As we're growing.
Because if we view them differently, then we'll have our own concept of how to help them.
Delivery of mission can change based on your viewpoints. That's a good point. What else? Why does social philosophy matter now? What are we doing as we grow? Where are we going into? Say it. Schools. Right? See, it's easy to stick to the mission when everything is happening here. And we all have the same systems of support. We all operate under, if you think about it, Higher Ground is a community within a community. Right? We're a community within a community. For those of you that actually work at home base, right, you guys understand that, you guys see that. Right? But now, as we're growing, what are we doing? We are integrating ourselves into other communities. The schools. Schools are their own communities with their own community rules. High school have its own set of rules. Ever watch Mean Girls? Love that movie. Yes, I said it. I love that movie. Right? But Mean Girls, again, is a very good social view of what really happens in classrooms. She compares it to, what did she, jungle. Or the was it jungle or the African Sahara? I think it was the African Sahara, right? She compares it to that. Right? But again, we are now going into different communities. And what happens when you go to different communities? Now you have other systems, influences, and your personal biases that come into play. Here, our personal biases doesn't come into much play. Why? Because you are restricted by the system by which you operated. But once you are in a different society and you are now operating on your own, what happens? your personal biases tend to come out. You guys know why communication is one of the hardest things to do psychologically? Communication, basic communication, is one of the hardest and most complex things that humans do. You guys know why? Why is communication so hard between humans compared to other animals? Most animals don't have the same problem we do with communication.
Experience and perception.
Experience and perception forms personal biases. See, animals, have you guys ever seen a swarm? Like a locust swarm? Do you guys know that there is no leader in a swarm? That for most animals, their communication is so instinctive and simple that they don't need a leader. It's funny, locusts, for example, they will swarm. The problem with them swarming is they may actually end up eating each other since they're very hungry. And they only swarm when they're hungry, when there's not that much food, right? But they can swarm without a leader. Why can they swarm without a leader? Because they find it easy to communicate with each other. And they follow 3 simple rules. We're all going the same direction, even though there's thousands of us. We are going to try not to be too close to each other so that we don't eat each other. That's real. And the third part is that we are all going to make sure that we create a certain massive, keep a certain massive shape. That way predators think we're bigger than what we are. With humans, it's hard to swarm. Why is it hard to swarm as humans? Because we have a hard time really communicating. Because our communication, if I was communicating with Andres, there's 2 barriers right away. What's the first barrier? What's the first barrier? Huh? My accent? Right? Outside of my accent. Pretending that I have perfect English. And I'm an Englishman. Whatever. With that accent. Right? What's the first barrier? If I were to tell him to do something. That's the second barrier. The first barrier is actually how I interpret what I'm asking him to do. My own personal bias. Because how I interpret what I want him to do may be completely different from what I'm actually asking him to do. The reason why we're discovering it's so hard to communicate is we're trying to teach people who have autism how to communicate. See, if we were to tell people who don't have autism, go make friends, right? We have our own bias to that. So for us, what does that mean? If I were to tell you, you're a child and you're in a playground, go make friends, how do you interpret that? As a normal, non-autism brain, how do you interpret that? How do you make friends at the playground? Come on. You go talk to them. Yeah, you go over there and you say, hi, right?
How you doing?
How you doing? My name is so-and-so. The problem is when you have a brain with autism, they don't recognize that. I had this problem growing up. So when I was told to go make friends, this is what I did. I'd sit right next to the person I like to make friends with. And when they tell me, well, you got to talk to them, I don't bother introducing myself. I just go, hey, you see that slide? We should go crack our heads on it. Because that's what I wanted to do. That's not a joke. It sounds so simple. But again, when you really take into account a person's personal bias and his interpretation of it, well, heck, if somebody came up to him with that, what would his interpretation of it be? You're weird. You're a weirdo. Get away from me. Whereas my interpretation was what? I want to make friends. So communication is so hard Because of that, because of personal biases. So social philosophy, how does this tie into social philosophy? Because the way we view our society is very much biased toward individual ideas and constructs and the way we were raised. And as we deploy ourselves into other communities, we as an organization gotta have a general sense and common philosophy on how we view society. That means racism. That means systems of inequity. That means having a basic understanding of how privilege happens, how oppression happens. Social philosophy is a very difficult conversation to have. But see, here's why that matters to us. Because see, we keep on saying that as an organization, we do it through love and building character. Let me put this in the simplest sense. See, we had a student who was in jiu-jitsu, who whenever he got upset, his instantaneous response is to escalate the matter to a fist fight. And in his own words, they're bothering me, so I gotta end it. That way they don't bother me again. Right? Why am I giving you guys this example? Because this is a simple social philosophy misunderstanding. Because the way he was raised, his father taught him that when people bother you, the only way they will respect you is if you show them that you are much stronger than they are. Is that wrong? Is that wrong? Depends on the society. It depends on the situation. It depends on where you're at. And then we've been teaching him, on our end, we've been teaching him, you know, when you're strong, you need to help others. And that whenever people bother you, just don't let them bother you and just be an armadillo. Basic, simple thing. I know I simplified it a little too much. But again, in both sense, both higher ground and the parents, they both love the kid. We both love them. And we both want to build character to the kid. We were doing the exact same thing. So when we sat down with the parents, we had to literally figure out how to remove our personal biases to get to an agreement point. And here was the agreement point. It's like, you know what? I see your point, and I see that the situations my son are in is not at this level. So I need to teach him what you're teaching him when it comes to these situations. Great. Or we could have easily made the assumption, man, you're a bully, and you're teaching your kid to be a bully. But again, social philosophy now matters because we could literally deliver the same mission with the same heart with two completely different approaches because of the way we view society. The father's background is military. And he's been to jail, he's been to a lot of different things. So guess what social philosophy he's operating on? It is absolutely correct. You show your strength to get respect. But like I explained to the father, well, your son is not in those situations. He's in the playground, he's in the classroom, he's in the van. There's absolutely no need for him to show strength. He needs to use his words. Right? But again, that is affected by how we view society. So, before we get started, we are going to play a game. And the game is basketball. And this is what we are going to do. This is what we're going to do. We are going to pick two team captains right now, and I'm going to arbitrarily pick it. Alright, and that will be Arthur. Alright. And that will be Christina. Why not? Alright, so what we're going to do is you guys are going to, alright, you guys are going to see
I feel really pressured.
who can jump higher, and whoever can jump higher gets to pick the first 10 members of their team.
Oh, he's all, let's go.
Alright?
Oh, short.
Alright, so we're gonna see this, alright? So, see that red spiral thing? Alright, who wants to jump and touch it first?
The red spiral thing?
Yeah.
On the roof.
Oh! Oh, snap! Oh, snap! I want the roof! Alright, Christina, your turn. No. Alright, so, Arthur, let's all go to the MPR. Arthur, you will pick your first 10 members first.